Hi, this is an example of basic loops using Python. So you might have already studied it, read a book, looked at some web pages, but here's a short and snappy tutorial just to keep you coding. So quite focused. I'm just going to give you some examples. I'm not going to cover everything because that will be in a further tutorial. So for a while loop, you'll have the while followed by the condition and colon. For a for loop, you'll have the for word followed by the condition. So let's look at while loops first of all. If we go into my Linux shell, I've already started a program called pass.py, so I'm going to just show you that. So what I have here is I've set a variable called tries, which I've named myself, set it to 1. While tries is less than or equal to 3, which it is at the start, that forces it into the loop. Do this code because that's all indented. So ask for the username and the password. If the username is test and the password is test, print you're in, and set tries to 3. That way it will make sure it exits out of the loop. Otherwise, else, print access denied, and then increment tries equals tries plus 1. It doesn't matter that it takes it above 3 because it's going to be false by the time it gets here, because even if it's 4 is not less than or equal to 3, so it'll come out of the loop. So let's have a little look at that working. So that's first go, second go, and then out. So let's do a couple wrong and then type test. So I'm in. And a couple wrong and then do the third one correct. Okay, so you can see that that code works correctly with this while loop here. Without having a start value, it will not run the while loop. So if I just sort that out, take that away just to show you. It's not going to work because the value has not been defined already. So you do need that to be initialized. So that's a very quick example of a while loop. An example of a for loop where you're using the range function for counter in range 0 to 9. Do whatever is within that loop. So there's lots of different for loops. You'll need to look into those, but here's a very simple example just to get you started. So let's have a little look at that. Alright, so clear. So I'm going to I'll just call it for to make it easy for myself. For counter, which is my own variable name. I'll just do 5, 0 to 5. Remember the colon. Indent anything that's going to go underneath it. I'm just going to put the words counter and then the variable counter. Very simple program. And save that. For.py, so there it is. And then Python for.py. Alright, so obviously that doesn't need to be counter, and I'll just change that value to 10, so you'll see 0 to 9. So that's an example of a for loop. Another example is counting vowels and consonants in a string. So this is why we're using a for loop to go through a string of letters. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of using a for loop in a different way. So what we're going to do is get the user to enter a string of text. I'm going to set a variable to contain the vowels. I'm going to loop through the message, the string that the user entered, turn each letter to lowercase, just check whether it's a vowel or not, and then add one to a counter. I'm going to print appropriate messages on the screen as well. So I'm about to do that in Linux, so I'm going to just do count.py. So message is going to contain the string. Vowels is stored in a variable called vowels, that's just put as uppercase. Constants is a counter, vowels is a counter, they're set to 0 at the start, and then using a for loop, for letter, that's my own variable name, in message, which is the message that was entered. So for each letter in the message, it will automatically move on to the next one. If the letter that it's currently looking at, .lower, the lowercase version of it, is not in vowels, then increment the consonants variable. Else if, elif, the current letter is in the vowels, then increment the vowel counter. I've just used a simple increment. I don't want to complicate things by incrementing using a shorthand version. So outside of the loop, this is a comment with a hash. I'm just going to print there are, and then the variable, consonants, and then the string. So this is a literal, this is definitely going to be printed, and this is a variable, so you need to close the string, use a comma, and put the variable in there, and then open up the quotes to carry on with your string, and then close it again to put the other variable. So what you'll get with this is Python count.py. You just end up with a counter of how many consonants and how many vowels there are. So that's quite a simple example of another for loop. And this is an example of where it was used in the idle editor. In idle, it allowed me to use input rather than raw input. Just be careful with the different versions of Python. If you need any more information, go to my website where you'll find many more examples.